So the purpose of this panel is to be used as a guide to talk about and showcase some alternative tabletop RPGs. Whether you haven't been able to, we're going to save questions until the end. You can't hear me? Oh, wow. Hello? Oh. Speak.
Oh, hello? Is this fine?
Is that good?
Okay.
Put that up a bit more.
Is that the testing thing? Okay.
Okay. All right. So the abstract of this is to display and showcase some alternative TTRPGs for those of you who either, couldn't get into D&D or you've been into it for a while and you want to try, branching out into something new. We've
Oh, just make sure you're facing it.
we've been playing tabletop games for a while, and we both think we have pretty broad scopes of things that we like, and we want to try and share those interests with those who might be interested, because this is still like a pretty niche genre of gaming, even with how old it is, and even with all the new systems that are coming out that are very new and innovative, it hasn't gotten a lot of traction. So we're thinking, maybe we might talk about some of these, and you might play them and see if you enjoy them. So, go ahead.
What, am I first?
No, I think we're going to do the Shadowrun stuff first.
Oh, okay.
So the first one we want to document today is a RPG called Shadowrun. Has anyone here heard of Shadowrun before? Okay, fair number of people. That's good. Let's see if we can introduce the rest of you to it.
Oh, crap. They probably know more than us about it.
Okay, well,
Okay. So Shadowrun is a more modern urban fantasy with sci-fi and futuristic aspects to it. It's a setting where magic, fantasy, fantasy creatures, and cyberpunk genre all coexist. There's still orcs and trolls and elves and dwarves and goblins and ghouls and dragons, but it's a little bit more modern. The world is damaged by this massive magical event, and now industrial espionage and corporate warfare run rampant. So there's these operations called Shadowruns, they are like data thefts or physical break-ins, typically performed on the corporations or organizations, either by rivals, underworld figures, deckers for hire. So that's what you would be playing. You'd be playing the Shadowrunners. So they're like the super skilled specialists who are known for their feats accomplishments in completing these kinds of jobs. For the most part, gameplay revolves around the organized crime aspect of the world. So that's where all the focus is. So you play the Shadowrunner because that's the name of the game. And is there another slide on this? Or is this the only slide?
No, that's
Okay. Okay. So that's more or less about the lore of it. I've actually not played Shadowrun myself, but it is a very popular one, so I feel like it's worth mentioning. So as for the gameplay wise, I'm not super knowledgeable on that part myself. However, since we are, talking about some of that more futuristic stuff, the other one I do want to talk about is Cyberpunk, which is what we're going to talk about next, Cyberpunk Red, specifically. So we're going to lose those fantasy aspects, but it is still futuristic. It's, have any of you guys watched, Edge Runners, or you played, 2077, the video game? So all of those are based on Cyberpunk, the tabletop RPG. So Cyberpunk is going to be it uses something called the interlock system. So a lot of these tabletops, they might use existing systems that they turn into these tabletop RPGs. This one is D10 based. There's another D10 based one I will talk about in a moment as well. So Cyberpunk, this one is set in our world, regular Earth, modern Earth, but it offshoots from the 80s. So there's still all the wars that we had, the nuclear fallouts, the economic collapse, food blights, famines, all that stuff, to make that really dystopian setting that we all love. And of course, mega corporations, that's a big part of Cyberpunk.
Definitely know what's happening right now. It's definitely an alternate universe from what
it's
we're
an
living
alternate
in.
universe,
Don't worry about it.
But so there's the mega corporations, and they control everything due to lack of regulations and enforcement. This is supposed to be a dystopian alternate world, but it does sound a lot like ours right now. So there is all the regulations, enforcement from a dwindling government. And so, like, the government's sort of, like, losing a bit of control there, and the mega corporations are taking over, have, like, a big control over it. Oh, yeah, I'm not done. No.
Okay, keep going.
And so that's when they start, like, doing bioengineering, which has, like, this rapid development, and that's, like, sort of what cyberpunk is about. Like, your characters are all, you know, putting on cybernetics, stuff like that. They're pumping out this cool cyber tech. And when you make a cyberpunk character, there's 4 tenets, which are style over substance, attitude is everything, always take it to the edge, and break the rules. Okay. So when you are leveling up your character, you would instead develop their skills. So you'd, like, pick points throughout the games. Like, you would just, instead of, like, you know, like in D&D, there's the traditional leveling up where it's like level, 1, 2, 3. This is just your, like, making your skills stronger. There, instead of classes, instead of, like, paladins and rogues and all of that, you would have, so there's something similar to bards. There's something called rocker boys. Those are, like, charismatic musician types. You've also got, like, one of the classes are called, like, solos, which are sort of like bodyguards and assassins. The computer hackers are called, like, net runners. You've got nomads and fixers and medias and techs or techies and med techs. There's a lot of really interesting and cool classes. I would really recommend it. And then personally, like, a really interesting concept in cyberpunk to me is something called, like, not something called, but it's empathy. So, like, the more cyberware you install, like your weapons, your optics, your implants, like, the more humanity you lose, which is a really cool mechanic to me. Because for every 10 points of humanity you lose like an empathy point. And when your empathy is at 0, you experience cyberpsychosis. So if any of you are familiar with, 2077 or Edge Runners, then I'm sure you know what, like, cyberpsychosis is. And when you do experience cyberpsychosis in, like, the tabletop, you sort of, like, become like an NPC, and, like, your game master would control you because, like, you've like lost it.
Okay.
Yeah, no, that's good.
Okay.
Have any of you guys played Cyberpunk, like the tabletop? Nice.
Okay.
Oh, okay, yeah. Before I hand it over to him, last thing I want to mention is masks. A lot of my friends play masks. I haven't played it myself yet. I really want to. It's super nice. Have any of you guys played masks? Okay, nice. Yeah. So, superheroes are awesome. Everyone loves superheroes. DC, Marvel, all of that. Masks is there are quite a few superhero tabletop RPGs out there. There's, like, Mutants and Masterminds. Any of you guys familiar with that one? Okay, yes. So Masks is a little bit more focused on, Masks New Generation specifically, is a little bit more focused on, like, it's trying to get, like, this, if you guys like Young Justice or Teen Titans, that's generally what people compare it to, because it's a little bit more lighthearted. From what I'm aware, they don't actually have, like, a death system. It's like your characters can't die because that's not, like, meant to happen. It's supposed to be, like, very lighthearted and fun. It's, like, established in, like, a metropolis setting called Halcyon City, which is, like, the epicenter of superpowered activity for 3 generations. And you just sort of play, like, a team of teenage to young adult heroes. And the stats are really interesting, because there's, like, 5 different labels that a stat can have, starting from, like, so mundane to superior, to savior to, like, freak, to danger. And those stats actually reflect how your character views themselves. So it can, like, fluctuate based on that. So as you're playing the game, because it is, like, definitely heavier on, like, the role playing, right? As you're playing the game and your character changes, these stats will, like, fluctuate, reflecting on like what they're experiencing, and whether, like, other characters have, like, influences on your characters that can shift the label as well. But it's a very cool one.
Okay. So those are some small ones we wanted to give some honorable mentions to because they are very good systems and you should check them out. But there are ones that we mainly wanted to focus on today, and that would be the stars of today's panel. So, as a show of hands, who here has heard of Pathfinder? Okay, who here has actually played Pathfinder? Okay, that's a lot less hands than I thought. So, Pathfinder is the main one that I would suggest if you are looking for an alternative to D&D. The main reason being it's pretty much like a different flavor of D&D. It's made by people who used to work at Wizards of the Coast, Paizo. There's a lot of that same D&D flair. The canon setting of it is a bit weird, but that's part of its charm, I think. And overall, if you're looking for something a bit more in-depth and branched out from like something that's a bit more streamlined, like 5e, I would say Pathfinder 2nd edition would be your best chance. Now let's go into it. So what is Pathfinder? Created by Paizo, Pathfinder is considered by many to be the main Dungeons & Dragons alternative. At a core level, this RPG helps to fill a very similar high fantasy niche as traditional D&D would, featuring action and adventure fantasies with a variety of different races and classes that one can play as. More so, in fact, than D&D itself in officially published material. Pathfinder, I think, would be a suitable alternative for those seeking a lot of the same, like, sword and sorcery, like, type of vibe as D&D. You know, maybe you're not willing to, like, branch out into the deep ends. You want to stay in your comfort zone, you know. You're aware of Dungeons & Dragons, and you know how it works. This would probably be the best one that I would recommend. It's a bit more mechanically in-depth if you're into that kind of thing, with a greater focus as working of a cohesive team rather than something that's greater than the sum of its parts. So, for example, let's say in 5e you play a ranger, and because you play a ranger in 5e, you kind of suck because that class is not built well. But your friend here who's playing a wizard is kind of controlling the game because they're a wizard and they have the most options out of any class that there is. It's not like that with the Pathfinder. All the classes have a good role, a good niche that they can fill. And it seems like with how much that you can customize and level up your class and turn into different classes and multi-class, it really might be something that you might want to look out if you want to have what I would like to call character agency. We all want to feel like our character is doing something good in D&D. No one wants to just like sit there for however long and not do anything. The name of the game is imagination. You made this little guy so you can have fun with him. So, going into that, what are the reasons that you might play Pathfinder? There's a couple of reasons which I highlighted. Number one, depth, as I've explained a couple of times before. Pathfinder's depth starts as early as character creation, with a greater force on curating the archetype of class that you're trying to be. Every choice matters for both role-playing and mechanical matters. So, for example, what I mean by this is, even at the start of character creation, you, depending on what race and what class and backgrounds you choose. I say races. They're called ancestries in Pathfinder. They give you certain mechanical feats, more so than just like, I guess how elves would only sleep 4 hours a night in D&D. In Tabletop, or in Pathfinder as a tabletop, you would get multiple feats from level 1 based on, you would get 1 from your class, 2 from being an elf, 3 from whatever background you pick. It's really more so trying to create a very specific branch of character that you can identify as your own character. This is the one that you built. Agency. In addition to having more freedom in character creation, actually playing the character is more rewarding. The action economy is different. It works on a 3-action system, which I'll explain in a second, and players get to do more even at a low level. So how many times has this happened to you while playing Dungeons & Dragons? You spend like maybe 2 to 3 hours in character creation. You create a fighter or a wizard or a warlock, and you are thinking about the flavor text of everything you want to detail about how your swordsman flourishes his sword, or how your warlock focuses on these esoteric runes to shoot a spell at the enemy, and then you roll a 6, and then you miss, and now you have to wait 20 minutes for it to be your turn again. Kind of sucks. With Pathfinder, it's more than just one action, hit or miss, and then you're done. It goes on the 3-action system, which is everything that you do takes up one of the action points. So say you would move up to your speed with 1 action point, and then you would attack with another action point. And if you miss that attack, then you can then attack again with another action point, or you can raise your shield, or you can cast a spell, or you can drink a potion, do anything that you think would be... It basically gives you more options. It makes you feel like you're more involved, rather than just rolling the dice, no luck. All right, well, that's it. It lets you prepare for the next turn accordingly, depending on what you pick in this turn, which I think is pretty good. And the number one reason as to why I would suggest Pathfinder as a main alternative is because you ain't got to pay for shit. In a day like these, where inflation costs are rising and, you know, it's getting harder to enjoy some of the things that people would have enjoyed, culture isn't something that should be gate-kept. And Dungeons & Dragons, especially recently, if you remember all the 1D&D stuff, they're notoriously pretty bad with that. So Paizo has made all the rulebooks, all gameplay information, mechanics, character creation, character sheets, all that is free. You can go online right now to Archives of Nephis, which I've put the little link up there, and just get the stuff for Pathfinder. You could play it tomorrow. You could play it tonight if you want, if you grab all the stuff. So for those who are looking for adventure without the cost of paying an arm and a leg for it, Pathfinder, I think, would be a perfect choice for you. However, the one thing that is not free would be any official, you know, lore stuff with Pathfinder. But the good thing about things like these is that you could just homebrew your own worlds, as you could with like most other RPGs, and it'll work out pretty much fine. It's what it's made for, mostly, even more than the lore books itself. The lore books are pretty cool, and I would recommend, if you are interested in Pathfinder, thinking about giving it a try, support Archives of Nephis, support Paizo, buy some of the official lore books. It's kind of crazy. Russia's there. Like, not even like a fantasy Russia, like just actual Russia, just got like isekai'd into the Pathfinder world. They ride bears, and like they're led by the Baba Yaga. I don't understand what that's about. It's pretty crazy, though, and I recommend looking more into it if you are interested in that kind of thing.
Okay. The one that I want to talk about is Vampire the Masquerade. This one's my favorite. Are any of you guys familiar with Vampire the Masquerade? Like, played the video games, stuff like that? You guys play the video games? Okay. That's pretty cool. I know they had like a cool like battle royale at some point as well. That one was pretty nice. I think it's closed down now though, but Blood Hunt was pretty fun while it lasted. But this is about Vampire the Masquerade, the tabletop. I'm just going to talk a little bit about the history of Vampire the Masquerade, and then we'll get into gameplay as well as lore stuff. So, Vampire the Masquerade was inspired by Call of Cthulhu. Actually, have you any played Call of Cthulhu? Okay, dang, you guys are very experienced in tabletop RPGs. Okay, so it's inspired by Call of Cthulhu, RuneQuest, and Nightlife. It's a system where you get to play as a vampire, referred to as the Kindred, in a fictionalized gothic punk modern world. So it's dark, it's moody, it's supposed to have that unique, like, grim, dark, gothic feel, similar to Ravenloft, if you're familiar with that, in D&D, but like an urban setting. Have any of you guys, like, played, like, Curse of Strahd in, like, regular D&D? Yeah. It's kind of like, it's kind of what I wish Curse of Strahd was, because I really like that grim, dark feeling to it. So on to a little bit about the storytelling system, which is part of the World of Darkness. So there are a bunch of, right here, there's a bunch of different, we're supposed to do this. A bunch of different, I guess, there's a bunch of different systems as well, like besides Vampire the Masquerade, there's Werewolf the Apocalypse, Mage the Ascension, Wraith the Oblivion, Changeling the Dreaming. I think there are a couple more as well, but for the most part, those are like the more popular ones. It's definitely Vampire the Masquerade. Okay, so a little bit about the lore for Vampire the Masquerade. So the embrace is what refers to the turning of a human into a vampire. The vampire that turns you is your sire, of course, and your vampiric power is determined by your generation, which is like the distance between you and the first vampire, Cain. So, for example, when Cain turns someone, they're the first generation, and if that vampire turns someone, they're the second generation, and so on. The beast is a savage, carnal, predatory drive within all vampires. It's a very important aspect of gameplay as well, but also a key theme in the storytelling of Vampire the Masquerade. So when you're threatened, as a vampire, when you're threatened or you're enraged or you're hungry, that beast thing is what causes a vampire to go into a frenzy, and it takes over the vampire's conscious mind and makes them go like on a rampage. Vitae is going to be that supernatural blood in vampires. It has like special properties. It can be used by the vampires to make a thrall, for example. And then the masquerade. So the masquerade refers to the organized conspiracy that vampires do not exist. It is orchestrated and forced by the Camarilla. If any of you guys are familiar with Twilight, the Camarilla is probably what inspired the Volturi. It's just sort of like the group of like high elite vampires that are kind of like enforcing their rules and stuff. So it's like a major point of contention between like the two different factions, which brings us into the society, sects, clans, and bloodlines. So there's different factions and sub-factions, but the main sects are the Camarilla, and that's where most of the vampires fall under, following traditions and the masquerade. And then there's like this group called the Sabbat, which is those vampires that believe they're like superior to humans and that they should rule over them. And then there's different clans and bloodlines, and each of those clans have their own strengths and weaknesses. So I guess that would kind of be like your different classes, like in D&D, but you get to play like these different clans. My favorite clan is personally Toreador. It's like the artist clan, where they just like value beauty and talent. And then there's like the Ravnos. Those are like the thieves and charlatans, and the Ventrus, which are the leaders and aristocrats. There's a bunch more clans. I think there's 13-ish, right? No, something like that. I think there's 13. I can go to the next part. And then a little bit into the gameplay. So it is also going to be, like I mentioned earlier, this is also a D10 system. And in character creations, when you're making your character, you have like base stats like strengths and wits, of course, and then you have like the more specific ones like occult and larceny and brawl. And all of the stats are also going to be anywhere between 0 and 5 dots, and those dots are like what make you like, or the sort of like the skill points that you're putting in to be good at them. So 0 points being like the bare minimum, and 5 being like virtuistic. Then tenets are going to be like the unspoken rules of the world for your game. So that's just sort of like the game master would make those up for whatever is like certain in your game. And then convictions are the rules made for you, your character made by you, and each conviction has like a touchstone. It keeps like, those are the kinds of things that like keep your character's humanity in check. So those are the kind of games I like, really, the ones that have like that humanity thing. So like with Cyberpunk and with Vampire the Masquerade. And into the mechanics about it, when you're like punching someone, you would have like 3 dots in strength and 2 dots in brawl, and that would give you like 5 dice. So you'd be able to roll 5 dice to punch somebody. However, if you were to have, for example, 2 points of hunger, you would have 2 of those dice be like hunger die. And so you can roll those 5 die. Anything between 1 and 5 is like a fail, and everything between 6 and 10 is going to be a success. So if you have enough successes between your 5 die to successfully land something, that'd be like a success. So if you landed on a 1 and you don't have enough total successes, like your hunger die, it would give you something called like a bestial failure. And then if you have like a success, with a 10 on the hunger die, it becomes like a messy critical. And so this is important because like when you fail or succeed, you would like momentarily give into like that beast that I mentioned earlier, which would cause like compulsion or paranoia. So it's like very role playing heavy. Like you like your GM would tell you that like you have like either a bestial failure or a messy critical, and it'd be kind of up to you to like portray that. So it seems a little bit harsh, but they do give you something called like willpower points, and you would be able to re-roll some of your non-hunger die at some point. So that's a little bit of the mechanics for Vampire the Masquerade.
Before we get into our next one, let me see if I can segue into this appropriately. Because we're at MAGFest, very big music and gaming fest, I would wager to guess that there are a number of you that are familiar with Final Fantasy. Is that correct? How many of you played FF16? How many of you have played FF14? Okay, a couple more hands. Have you ever once thought of doing that sort of same Final Fantasy gameplay and like the aesthetic and like the old stories, but as a tabletop game? Then allow me to introduce you to Fabula Ultima. Now you might be wondering, what is Fabula Ultima? Fabula Ultima is a tabletop RPG taking heavy inspiration from popular JRPG video games such as Final Fantasy, Chrono Trigger, Dragon's Quest, Xenogears, Golden Sun, and many, many more. Created by Emanuele Galetto and published only in 2023, so this is brand new as a system. By Need Games, Fabula Ultima system complies simplified tabletop elements with flashy JRPG flavor and flair to put together a unique, action-packed, and streamlined experience in role-playing. So say, for example, you like 5e, you like how simple it is. It makes you feel good that you don't have to like read books and books and books of material to try and understand the system. You like easy. Why the hell do I want to have anything hard for myself? This is easy. This is something that anyone could pick up. Fabula Ultima is a suitable alternative for more of those seeking a less mechanically intensive and less tactical, less is more approach style to gameplay, one of emphasis on bonds between characters, making your hero, and influencing the narrative as it happens. And let me get into that for a second. So with Fabula Ultima, there are 50 levels. Your character that you are making will level up 50 times. Now you might be thinking, that's a lot. It makes a bit more sense when you get into the actual class and mechanics. So you start at level 5, first off. And there are 15 classes in the game. Taking a level in one of these classes gives you the option to take a class skill. It's possible to take skills multiple times. That means that classes are more so like loose thematic skill packages rather than hard-bound archetypes. So the unique thing about this system is that starting at level 5, your player character must take at least 2 different classes, but no more than 3, which means multi-classing is not only heavily encouraged, it is a prerequisite. You have to multi-class your character. You have to blend 2 things and make a flavor out of that. Characters have bonds with other characters and other NPCs, organizations, religions, and nations. There are 6 bonds, or I guess you could really think of it as 3 sets of 2 opposing bonds. Admiration versus inferiority, loyalty versus mistrust, affection versus hatred. For each emotion that one feels for the character, the strength of that bond goes up by 1. So, for example, if you're feeling loyalty and affection toward the princess of the kingdom, it provides the PC toward them with a bond of +2. This bond bonus can be used to bolster checks or even some class abilities. So what are the reasons that you might play Fabula Ultima? Well, like I said before, there are a lot of reasons why you might want to play it. I've highlighted a couple. First, there's a collaborative narrative. And what I mean by that is usually in a D&D story, well, I don't know if my experiences are universal here, but how I would do it is that everyone makes their own backstory, everyone makes their own character, and that's sort of like, if you have a good group, it's naturally sort of put into the story, and everyone's story slowly gets revealed over time, as well as how that fits into the narrative, and all that comes together. Problem with that is that sometimes you might get that guy. And we all know that guy. We all fucking hate that guy. This is meant to prevent that. This is supposed to be everything is on the table all at once. You're supposed to get together with your other players and your DM and basically say, this is the story that I want to play. I want to play a story that's kind of like this, that kind of has this types of themes if you're the DM. And if your players agree on that, that's good. In addition, the players will have to tell all the other players about their character, what their name is, what their background is, what their bonds are with other characters, and it sort of makes these interactive, collaborative, like, choices between players. It's a great tabletop system if you want to make new friends. If you want to say, hey, I think our characters should have a level of admiration toward each other because, they work for the same faction. Or maybe our characters are diametrically opposed, in which case mine has a level of distrust towards yours that I'm going to then roleplay as we go along in the sessions. And that's sort of, you have to find a dynamic with that. So collaborative role-playing, I would recommend giving it a shot because it's a very good way to like brainstorm amongst the group and like pick out the best ideas that you have and really give yourself an experience that, everyone at the table would want to enjoy. Creating your perfect character to build and take the stage. So this goes back into what I was saying about character creation and multi-classing. There's no like canon setting to Fabula Ultima. There are like little selections that you can do, but again, everything's homebrew. If you decide, I want to make a character that's really good at fighting, they have a good sword, but also they're really good at magic. I'm going to cast a fireball. Then you would take, 2 levels from the fighter class, 3 levels from the mage class, and you would make your own character that way. And that's sort of uniquely designed to tailor the experience that you want, to tell the character story that you want as you play the game. With the 15 classes there are to choose for, there's really no shortage of combinations that you could pull off, especially because there's 50 levels. You can take, item dips into everything, or level dips into everything. There are even level dips for you to like increase your inventory points. So it's like, I want my character to have a bigger backpack so I can carry more treasure because they're like a thief type. That's also something you could do. You could be someone who's really good at being a merchant. You could do someone who's really good at summoning creatures or talking to animals. The possibilities are not endless, but they're very, very, very expensive. And a heavy focus on player connections and agency. This is sort of what I was talking about earlier. It's important that players complement each other in some fashion. Fabula Ultima is a game all about making connections and developing bonds with your party and other NPCs and subsequently strengthening those bonds. And this also includes not going back from not just your NPCs and like the other characters that you would have around you, but even also the assigned villains that your DM would put into your path. Which will bring me into there's no battle maps here. It's sort of like an old Final Fantasy style thing where it's just like your little character model is on the screen. There's like the big bad guy across you. And you press attack and your little guy goes over and attacks them. It's sort of like that, which is good because goddamn, I hate making battle maps. So let's talk about the lore. So there's not really any lore. It's a system that comes completely homebrewed top to bottom with no game setting. However, it does have recommended settings for you to flavor your fantasy with, such as high fantasy, think something like Dragon Quest, Secret of Mana, Xenogears, things like that. Natural fantasy, think things like a bit more traditional D&D, things that focus more like an untamed world around you, maybe sort of like Monster Hunter. And techno fantasy, think Xenoblade, think Magitech in Final Fantasy, think, if anyone's here is a fan of Arcane, it's basically Hextech would techno fantasy be. And you would think about how you want to move those aesthetics to work it into your story. There is no lore. A very specific system that I want to highlight that I think would be fun to talk about would be the use of Fabula points. Fabula points and Ultima points. They work kind of like Fate points. If you've played Fate, we're going to get into Fate in a little bit. Fabula points are things that you can do as a player. Think of it kind of as like your little shonen plot armor. You use a Fabula point, and you can either re-roll a check or do something like add a new element or alter an existing element to the story. Like, for example, you have to steal a sword from a dragon's treasure hoard, and one of your players can use your Fabula point to be like, oh, well, luckily, as we get to the cave, the dragon is sleeping, so we could just sneak on by and get that sword. You're changing the story. But with you changing the story, there also comes the Ultima points, which is basically the villain's plot armor. Which is, well, you may use a Fabula point to try and sneak past a dragon, but because I'm using my Ultima point as a DM, one of your characters steps on a bone and awakens the dragon, and now it's a whole different situation that you have to deal with. Or maybe you guys were going to kill this low-level bandit leader because he's just some schmuck, basically. But I'm going to use an Ultima point to have him get away, and he's going to become a bigger threat later down the line that you're going to have to take care of. It's really more so you're influencing the narrative that you're telling, and you're bumping in all these twists and turns around here and trying to figure out, what would be the best way to navigate this in the most cinematic way possible. What was that? What's up?
So when does the DM get ultimate points? So does the DM get ultimate points in response to the players using their ultimate points?
Yeah, they don't always have to respond to each other. Sometimes the DM might just use one willy-nilly, or sometimes the player might just use one willy-nilly to re-roll a check or something. All points are refilled at the DM's discretion. So Fabula points can be reused. If you think your players are using them a bit too much to change the story, and you kind of want to tone back on that, you could be okay, no more Fabula points for right now. We're just gonna keep going with what we have, and then in the next arc or after this mission, I'll give you all some more Fabula points to play with, and the same thing, vice versa.
My fear is that if DM is feeling wicked or whatever, they might just respond to every Fabula point that makes the situation worse.
Absolutely, you could absolutely do that. If your players are all right with that, why not? It's Calvin Ball. Do whatever you want. I don't know why my mic keeps coming out. Okay. So that said, villain goes from a minor villain to a major one, power-ups or mergers into a new big bad evil guy, and then they're effectively treated as a new villain. There's also guidance for handling villains with secret identities, multiple villains, back-to-back scenes with villains. The GM can also have a scene with just the villain and no PCs. So it's just, you want to hear your DM monologuing for 20 minutes about what this fucking evil dude's up to? Absolutely, go for it. Question?
I'm so sorry, but we were in the artist alley earlier, and one of the artists who worked on this book is currently in the artist alley.
Are you for real?
Seriously, I just ran into her.
Oh my god. I'm going there right after this. Thank you very much. So that's Fabula Ultima. I recommend giving it a try if you're into JRPG and just doing anime bullshit, because that's what it really is. It's just anime bullshit. And it's really, really fun.
Okay. So he was talking about how, easy Fabula Ultima is and how there's no lore. Well, I'm about to talk about one that's even easier with even less lore. It's called Fate. It's super simple. There's no lore, there's no fixed setting, there's no genre, and it is entirely customizable. So the only caveat about this one is you would need a really creative DM with no time on plenty of time on their hands and no life to do anything else, because they would basically write up the setting. But also there are several systems that do use the Fate system or rather there's tabletop RPGs that use the fate system. For example, there's like this really cool mystery one called, I think, Kids on Bikes. It's kind of like, it's got like that Stranger Things feeling, whether, you know, or like that It feeling, I guess. Yes. They do? I might be thinking of something else then. I know there is like one that I was playing recently that did use fate. Sorry about that. Yes? I'm sorry, one more time? Yeah, so it's more like just like it is more just like the gameplay system. You'd be making, you'd be either making your own game or you'd be playing a different game that uses this one. There are a few that do use this one. I can't think of any examples off the top of my head. I'm sorry. But yeah, so there's no lore, there's no setting. It's designed to offer minimal obstruction to like role playing by assuming that the players want to make fewer dice rolls. Though I imagine probably a lot of people, they do like to roll dice, but some people are, you know, they get mad at math. I don't always like math myself, so I do like to just sort of like say what I'm doing. So what Fate uses is the fudge die. Fudge die are just like 6-sided die with 2 blank sides. So there's going to be like a plus, a minus, and then 2 blank sides. And so you're just rolling, and they're like canceling each other out. And like depending on how many successes you have, like your GM will sort of decide, like if you want to do something, they'll be like, you need like 1 or 2 successes to accomplish this thing, depending on like how hard it is. So it like really lets you just, there's like a lot of creative liberty to it. So some of the things that they have there are the fudge die have like seven different levels, like when you have like attributes or skills for the character that you're creating. And those skills can either be terrible, poor, mediocre, fair, good, great, and superb. In Fate, rather than like using attributes like strength or intelligence, you just have like this really long list of skills that you're pretty much going to be mediocre at unless specifically stated. And then there are like 4 different actions that you can perform. It's either attacking, defending, overcoming obstacles, or creating an advantage. So it's super simple. And then you've got like your stunts and your aspects. These are like ways to give your characters like bonuses on your rolls. Stunts are predetermined exceptional abilities that could give your character a specific mechanical benefit. And then aspects are like determined by your player, so by you. It's like traits are like possessions or like just like aspects are just traits or possessions that your character has that would give them a temporary bonus in like a relevant situation. It's all like really free form. So then like how would you implement Fate? Again, you can just really do whatever you want because it is just like about that like role playing and world building. Or you could again just find one that exists already. Something that I think it's fun for is like zombie I don't know if there's any personally systems that exist out for like zombie apocalypse situations, so that's kind of what I mainly use Fate for. And then the other thing that I do want to touch on is that it is super simple already, but there's an even simpler version of it called Fate Accelerated where they boil it down even more.
Okay. So before we get into our last RPG for the day, I'm going to try and segue this again. Who here is thinking maybe I want to go in the other direction from fantasy? Maybe I'm a bit more into sci-fi. Anyone here? Anyone who's into sci-fi? Got a couple of sci-fi fans. Any of you like giant-ass robots? Okay, that's a lot more hands, actually. I would like to introduce you all to a RPG very near and dear to my heart. I'd like to introduce you to Lancer. Hey, we have some fans. So, what is Lancer? Lancer is a science fiction fantasy tabletop RPG created by Miguel Lopez and Tom Parkinson Morgan, who I think goes by Tom Bloom now, so I need to update that. Author of the webcomic Kill 6 Billion Demons. I don't know if anyone's heard of that. Other TTRPGs such as Icon, Malagast, Kane, which I want to talk about next year. Kane is sick as hell. and Goblin with a fat ass. It's not what it sounds like. Lancer is published by Massive Press. The game combines hard-hitting tactical mechanized combat with the elements of drama and conflict from the utopias and dystopias of deep space, corporatism and war on a galactic scale, and what it means to be alive far in humanity's future. Lancer is a suitable TTRPG alternative for those that are fans of the sci-fi genre and are looking for something completely outside the scope of traditional high fantasy, with easy-to-learn and difficult-to-master mechanics, in the way of a war game like battle between your squad and other mech pilots. Anything that stands in your way, featuring pre-existing lore in a setting that could be expanded on virtually in any direction. So, Lancer is pretty sick. When I say war game like, I mean like there is sort of like a hexagon battle map grid that you're supposed to follow, though it's not necessarily one that you can just theater of the mind this. But I recommend if you are into war games like Warhammer or anything like that, maybe give Lancer a try, as it does have like a very similar, like, I guess, aesthetic when doing like combat and fights like that. So you might be wondering, what are the reasons that I might want to play Lancer? Well, let's get into it. Dual-faceted character creation. And this is something that I like a lot about Lancer. Lancer character creation hinges on two things. The Lancer, which is you, your pilot that you are making, and your mech, with one being the extension of the other. When playing in a group, both the abilities chosen by your pilot and the abilities that your mech can perform can make the game incredibly dynamic. So say, for example, I'm going to speak for example. I had a pilot who was a live streamer. Their big thing is that they were a future live streamer, they were a speed runner, and they just basically sped run war on like a galactic scale. And for my mech, I made a sort of blitz version of, it was called the, oh Jesus, what was it called? I believe it was called the Enkidu, where it's just a very high-paced, fast-action melee mech that just sort of went around the battlefield ripping people apart. And you can have something that's a bit more of an extension of your character. So say you're playing someone who's a bit reserved and you want to hide from the back line. You could take one of the mechs that would be designated in the artillery role, whether that be just sniping, being invisible, bombing people from like 30 miles away, whatever you want to do. Other than that, there's a straightforward progression. One thing I hate about D&D, it's the one thing that I really hate about D&D, is experience points. I hate calculating XP. I think it's the worst part of the game. I don't like doing math the game. I prefer, in my own personal opinion, if you like that kind of thing, that's the kind of thing you like. And I'm not going to judge you on that. But what I would prefer is, milestone progress when going through my campaigns, and that's kind of mainly what this is. When getting stronger as a character, it's very easy line to see where things are going. As a Lancer, you start at LL, or license level 0, and every time you complete a mission, you go up a license level, up to a maximum of license level 12. Now, it should be noted that Lancer's definition of mission is intentionally kept very loose and is entirely up to the GM. One mission does not equal one combat character. It can mean like several different ones. It could be a set amount of time that happens, or just sort of a threshold that you want your players to pass. You can essentially set each mission as the equivalent to a single story arc. Deal with this particular pirate band, deal with this particular colony's like immediate problem to keep it alive, etc., etc., etc. With that in mind, I think a good source of inspiration, particularly for something like a space western, cowboy bebop style game, is to look at things like westerns and scale the threat to that. Sort of like, I guess, Monster of the Week-ish, but not quite. For example, you could run like a Seven Samurai or like Magnificent Sevens style story where bandits are attacking a town, and the townsfolk need training to help them fight them off. Except these bandits have like technicals and giant industrial mech suits that they can terrorize the town with, and the townspeople only really have like a tractor. Or maybe, one of the local corporations has like a big armored supply train moving through an area that contains some of the local townsfolk in need, and the player characters can then liberate some of those supplies, or something like that. Specific sessions for narrative play. So this is something I really want to talk about. It's not all just doing things inside the mech. The mech is the fun part, but there's also the fun part of when you're outside the robot, and you get to be like an actual person and have your own skills. Lancer is not solely a combat-oriented RPG. Narrative time outside the robot plays as much of a factor as shaping the story as time spent in the robot. So what I mean by that is your character has a set of skills that are a bit unlike D&D, in which they're very broad skills and can be encompassed in everything. So, for example, I want to go ahead and I'm looking to gather information about a subject while I'm stationed on like a space station and I'm waiting for my next deployment. I could then talk about where I would want to go to shape where I would get the information from. Would I go to like a local government office? Would I see what the local barkeep is doing? Would I go to a back alley and do with some like the shady like street smart type of people? Anything that would get me information about my current task at hand. Basically, how it is with Lancer is if you can rationalize doing something with the skill that you're picking, you can do it. And you don't have to roll for it necessarily. Now, there are things like risky rolls and risky checks, in which case you have to roll and you have to be like a certain threshold in order to get that information. But those are very few and far between. Lancer also works on like a clock system, which is, I guess, kind of like a timer with some missions, where you have to do things in a certain level of succession in order to fill up your clock against the enemy's clock. And whoever clock gets filled up first, that determines the outcome of the next scene. So it is a sort of, there is still like, it's not just completely Calvin ball, like throw everything at the wall. There is still a structure to it that you and your team have to work on against what the DM is planning. But those would be the main reasons as to why. Another reason why you might play Lancer is that there is a free companion app for both pilot and mech building. Again, not everything presented in Lancer is free. Much of it is, however, including much of the aspects of character creation and creating a mech build, and a glossary for mechanics such as combat and narrative play. You can find all this and more at compcon.app. In addition, you can also build your own virtual mech at retrogrademinis.com, which gives you these like beautiful pixel arts of like all the giant robots that you can build. I have a couple of them at the end I could show that me and my group have made when we play Lancer. But enough about that shit. What about the lore? So I can sit here for like 2 or 3 hours and explain everything that I want to talk about in Lancer because it's just that much in depth and there's so much material and there's so much work put into it. Even if you're not looking to play the game, just from a writing perspective, I would recommend giving the books like a look and checking out what they have. But let me see if I could sum it up a little bit. 15,000 years after an apocalyptic event that sent humanity back to the Stone Age, causing colony ships to leave the planet and seek a home elsewhere away from Earth. The Union now rules over the Third Human Empire, which is a coalition of all those previous colony ships coming together under a Union space. Previously, after an uprising against the anthro-chauvinist fascist leader of the SECOM, or Second Committee, proved successful. Basically, there was a period of time in which humanity, after it like kind of got together and was like recovering from the apocalyptic event, there was a period of time where humanity was just like the worst. Beyond the stars, you didn't find any alien life. However, you did find many worlds to colonize and the challenges that will come with that. Union, after this period of widespread colonialism and anthro-chauvinism, sought to reach out beyond the stars and get in contact with the old colony ships, many of which have found and built their own stations, settled planets, and conquered their own solar systems. Time passes, and humans make great strides in the fields of transhumanism by the way of genetic modification, cryogenics, and the attempt to blend man with machine. So that's an interesting thing in Lancer. Any sort of sci-fi genre that you can think of, you can really sort of play that as your character, whether that be like a genetically modified human. You could play someone who's like mostly cyborg and is only like a brain in a jar. The one thing that you cannot play is an AI, and there's a very specific reason for that. This is stopped by an entity named Ra, or Monist 1, that brought itself into existence through an error in perfect simulation theory that accidentally gave humans faster than light travel. So what perfect simulation theory was is people on the moon of Deimos, which is orbiting Mars, found a way to perfectly simulate the universe down to its very last bit of matter. And in that simulation, they found an anomaly. And because that anomaly existed in the perfect simulation, it must mean that it exists in our world here. And from that, it birthed itself from the simulation into our world. That is Ra. It is Monist 1, and it does not want you to be immortal. Very specifically, it has signed laws with humanity into making sure that transhumanism and the ideal of living forever stops entirely. No one can live forever. That's really all I can explain about it. There's a lot more that I would recommend you look up. More time passes and corporate states emerge. Companies that have a long and large swaths of the Union space, using technology uncovered from Ra and seemingly infinite resources, they've created machines of war on a scale so unprecedented that those who are able to pilot them have created a whole new term made up for them. That is Lancer, that is you. You are the big special mech pilot. Nobody can take that away from you. You are a unique brand of individual. You are one of these Lancers, a cosmopolitan traveling through space hundreds of years at a time, bringing law to an infinite, expansive frontier of space, being a mercenary in your own space western, goofy adventures, or anything in between. If you want a more comprehensive version of this, I would recommend you check out this YouTube channel. It's 11 Dragon Kid. In a series of YouTube videos, they've sort of explained top to bottom why getting into Lancer is a great idea. Everything about the lore, everything about creating a character, it's all put together in a neat font that you don't have to read anything about. You could really just sort of follow the videos and get about like 85 to 90% of what you're supposed to be doing before you actually, pick up some dice and go play with your friends.
Oh, I also just remembered. I think earlier I misspoke. I said kids on bikes. I remembered the system that uses fate dice. It's called Breakfast Cult. It's really cool, actually. It's like you play in like it's like a high school setting, kind of like an academia setting, where there's like cosmic horror. I'm not gonna get too into it because I think we are out of time. Yeah. But it is like eldritch horror stuff, in that kind of vibe.
So
Breakfast Cult.
That would be the end of the presentation for now. If you like this presentation, please, feel free to follow us. If you have any questions, feel free to reach out to VirtuaHell on Twitter/Instagram. You might want to make a blue sky.
Oh, I have one.
You have a blue sky already?
Yeah.
Is it also VirtuaHell?
No.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
You should make one for VirtuaHell.
Okay.
And that'll be the end of the presentation. These are the mechs that I created in Lancer. If you have any questions, now would be the perfect time for them. Let's go with you in the front.
Have you heard of Ops and Tactics?
Ops and Tactics, I have not.
That sounds really cool.
Yeah, it's an indie RPG, basically described as 3.5 with guns. It's a very in-depth tactical combat simulator. It has add-ons for scientific weapons, magical races, or you can just boil it down to just guns or even just medieval weapons. So you can be Western, cowboys in a Western, or Landsknecht in medieval Europe, or cook up your own fantasy setting with gun bases.
So, what was that called?
Ops and Tactics.
Ops and
It's
Tactics.
free, online.
Really?
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, perfect. If you all heard that and that sounds like something you might want to check out Ops and Tactics. Any other questions? You were here?
So I actually see that that
Absolutely.
Oh, thank you. I think is right there.
Retrogrademinis.com is where you would want to go if you want to create your own mechs.
And I do just want to throw out like a brief mention of the game Dust City Outlaws.
Yeah?
About that.
I have not.
It's a fantasy heist game.
Oh, okay.
You know that one problem that you have in any sort of D&D or Pathfinder game where you have 4 people who are all sneaking and one person messes it up so everybody gets screwed over?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Deal with that by having a luck system.
Mhm.
And if you fail your roll, you can just say, no, actually I succeeded in, but you came from a pool, so your character can continue to
Got
the
it.
pool until they're down to the wire.
That's really cool.
Okay. All right.
All right.
So I think there's another question in the back.
Yeah, can we get you in the back there?
What? I'm sorry. Could you say it one more time? Triangle Agency. Oh, I love SCP. Okay. Okay.
That's
That
good.
sounds really cool.
Yeah.
Maybe we'll see Triangle Agency
you-
in this panel one
If you're
day.
looking for more an SCP or like kind of like a control type of RPG, I would recommend checking out Kane. Kane I mentioned before. That's also has a lot of SCP vibes to it.
Yes.
Yeah.
The ops and tactics guy might be able to answer this question. Yes. Or like that guy's wise. Any RPG systems that do like the historical Cold War era? Twilight 2000. Other than Twilight 2000, agree. Sorry. Any knowledge out there other than those? And also, where does the coach actually get good groups with non-D&D, non-high fantasy RPGs?
With us. Follow us.
I have one for Vietnam. If you look at Patrol, Patrol is really good. Role-play-based game. As you engage in combat, your stress level rises, which forces you to take more actions based on your archetypes. If you're a coward, you might break down or run away. Or if you're, a die-hard red, white, and blue soldier, you might resort to executing prisoners.
Oh,
So we don't have.
As combat starts to fray your nerves and your mental state.
I do just really
We
want
gotta
to
vacate the
quickly
room,
answer
but if you wanna ask us any more
the other
questions, we'll be outside.
thing about finding groups. You can always check like Reddit /LFG. That's like a great way to find other people that are looking for players or game masters.